Welcome to the Daybreak with Jeff Slakey podcast. I'm so happy you found us. Please subscribe, rate, review, and share this with your circle of influence. It's a collection of the interviews, news, and conversation during Daybreak with Jeff Slakey on I-Fiber One News Radio, KMAS, weekdays from 6 to 9.
Well, it's Tuesday, and a good morning to you. And Spencer, good morning to you. How you doing, bud?
Hey, I'm doing all right. How's it going with you?
Oh, things are going well, and we are looking forward to another great day, wrapping up that good interview you had. We'll mention that in a second. Today in the news, we've got the latest COVID numbers from Mason County, some data from Thurston County on tourism, more regional stories, and a report from Eric Tegedoff.
And I'll have the weather for you as always. One more day of rain, if we can stomach that, which is fine. We'll have a lot of sunshine and warm weather to reward us. We'll also have part 2 of my interview with Richard L. Haight on his book, The Warrior's Meditation. Mason County Public Health.
That was a good one.
Yeah, it gets even better.
That was a good interview with him.
Yeah, thanks. It was going so well that I kept going over the time limits that we have, obviously, for the time constraints of, the morning show. So I asked him to do a part 2. So that's how we ended up with doing part 2 today. So looking forward to that.
Full version on Sunday during the podcast hour?
Yes, I'm going to, it fits in perfectly with that. So I'll do that over two segments of the 4 segments that we do on the Sunday show. Yeah, thanks for reminding me.
Spencer's 6 o'clock in the morning and 9 o'clock in the morning, Sundays, for Spencer's Positivity Podcast Hour. All right, what's going on in the news?
Yeah, Mason County Public Health notified June 13th of one additional Mason County resident that tested positive for COVID-19. This brings the total to 40 positive cases, 3 active cases of COVID-19 in Mason County. Mason County Public Health is continuing contact interviews. The patient, a female in her 60s, is currently isolating at home.
Well, new data released by Tourism Economics, a national travel research firm, shows that visitor spending in Thurston County grew about 25% between 2015 and 2019. This includes a 7% surge from just the last year, outpacing the average state growth of 4.5%. Thurston County welcomed 3.5 million guests from outside the region. Although Thurston County was set for another year of growth, COVID-19 swept the globe, swiftly reversed that forecast. Washington State tourism is down big time. According to Washington's Tourism Alliance, June 2, they had a press release. SeaTac experienced a decrease of near 93.6% in passenger volume in April alone.
Wow.
So that means if there's 100 people at SeaTac, 93 of them were not there.
It's incredible. My oldest son got a job maybe 6 months ago or something before this happened at SeaTac, and he's still laid off. I mean, there's not enough volume coming in even now, traffic to warrant bringing him back yet. And is that
people wanting to fly, or is that even flights?
Yeah, no, flights have been severely curtailed, and then when you do have a flight, there's half the capacity or even less than that on board. And he was doing things related to the luggage and stuff. So when you don't have those bodies coming in there, you don't have the luggage coming in there, and no need for as many people.
Wow. A significant decrease in visitors, of course, means sharp decline in tax revenue, and we've heard those stories here in Shelton as well. In 2019, Thurston County visitors spent $459 million on accommodations, dining, and more, generating tax revenues that saved local households $626 in state and local taxes, which is another reason why tourism is so important.
Oh, absolutely it is. U.S. prosecutors say the Navy's leading supplier of high-strength steel for submarines provided subpar metal for decades because one of the company's longtime employees falsified lab reports and results. The Justice Department said yesterday the supplier, Kansas City-based Bradkin Incorporated, paid $10.9 million as part of a deferred prosecution agreement. The company provides steel castings made at a foundry in Tacoma that are used to make submarine hulls. Prosecutors say Bradkin discovered the fraud in 2017, but failed to disclose its scope to the Navy. The foundry's lab director also has been charged criminally. The company said the incident is not representative of the organization. The Seattle City Council has voted unanimously to bar police from using tear gas, pepper spray, and several other crowd control devices after officers repeatedly used them on mostly peaceful protesters protesting racism and police brutality. The 9-0 vote yesterday came amid frustration with the Seattle Police Department, which used tear gas to disperse protesters in the city's densest neighborhood, Capitol Hill, just days after Mayor Jenny Durkin and Police Chief Carmen Best promised not to. The council heard complaints from residents forced out of their homes by the gas, even though they weren't protesting.
The Washington Department of Health says coronavirus infections are on the increase both sides of the Cascades. Situation report says state epidemiologists have seen a particularly large increase in Benton, Yakima, Spokane, and Franklin counties, but said the latest data through the end of May indicates likely increases in infections across the state. The results, the reports say, include increases in coronavirus transmissions over Memorial Day weekend, but not infections that may have occurred during recent protests that drawn tens of thousands of people together in cities and towns across the state. The Trans Mountain Pipeline has suffered an oil spill at a Canadian pump station and caused a temporary shutdown. The Bellingham Herald reported the pipeline leaked from the Sumas pump station in Abbotsford, British Columbia on Saturday. The pipeline carries about 300,000 barrels of crude oil and fuel each day in Canada. A portion of the pipeline stretching about 69 miles delivers oil across our state. Trans Mountain Corporation says the leak at the station about 10 miles north of Sumas released between 940 and 1,195 barrels of light crude oil. It was contained on the Trans Mountain property.
The perils of traffic aren't just a human concern. Wildlife advocates say animals need highway crossings to survive. Eric Tegedoff reports.
The perils of traffic aren't just a human concern. Wildlife advocates say animals need highway crossings to survive. Mitch Friedman's organization Conservation Northwest was integral in a wildlife crossing project on I-90 east of Snoqualmie Pass.
If we don't provide ways for wildlife to get under or over our roads and highways in the places that they need to cross, then we end up with smashed cars, injured drivers, and dead wildlife.
As Congress considers a major transportation bill, Friedman is eyeing the Wildlife Crossing Pilot Program. It would provide $250 million in grants over 5 years to states, tribes, and local governments for wildlife infrastructure projects. Friedman notes these projects also would provide jobs at a time when unemployment numbers are high. Beth Pratt is a regional executive director of the National Wildlife Federation in California. She's part of an effort to build the largest wildlife crossing in the world over 10 lanes of Highway 101 in Los Angeles. But Pratt notes crossings have to do more than get animals across highways.
No matter what site you're using, the animals have to feel comfortable going over it, they have to feel comfortable approaching it, and they have to feel comfortable, obviously, when they get off it, that you're leading them into ground that feels safe.
Pratt says without the LA Project and others, species such as cougars face a serious challenge crossing highways.
At worst, could prove not just deadly for one animal, but actually hasten the extinction of local populations of wildlife.
Friedman with Conservation Northwest says he used to worry that wildlife crossings would be controversial.
The public generally supports these things, and I've yet to see a backlash against taxpayer investment in providing wildlife crossings to make our highways safer.
For Washington News Service, I'm Eric Tegedoff.
Well, thanks, Eric. Again, today on the show, more local news, conversations, the second part of that great interview with Richard Haight on the warrior meditation. And a reminder, another 2 weeks or so, the senior shout-out hotline is still open at 426-1030. Once this wraps up at the end of June, we have another great contest that will utilize the hotline, so we'll get you in and get you winning some great gift cards to a local restaurant here before too long. We'll give you those details. But more Daybreak Show is coming up.
From the iFiber One News Radio studios, you're listening to Daybreak.
Good morning. You're listening to Daybreak with Jeff Slakey and Spencer Hughes, and this is part 2 of our interview with Richard L. Haight. The website is richardlhaight.com. You can get his books through there. Some are available through Kindle. There's a members area. There's all sorts of great information on the official website of Richard L. Haight. and he is a martial arts expert, a spiritual teacher, and best-selling author. And we are talking with him about one of his books, The Warrior's Meditation, although I'd love to have you on as I read more of your books, Richard, and talk about some of the other ones in depth. But you had mentioned how children are really kind of more adept at this than even adults, and that goes back to my concern that up until, I don't know, maybe the last 5 or 10 years, it seems to me, this wasn't really talked about with kids. Parents don't really even understand it, let alone be able to teach it to their kids. And a lot of teachers, certainly in parochial schools, stay away from this because of that concern that it's indoctrination, or this misconceived notion that people have that meditation equals religion, and somehow it's tantamount to teaching religion in schools, but it really isn't. So it's a shame, really, when you think about it, the kids are really more in tune to this and they catch on to it quicker than adults do, and yet a lot of them aren't taught that. What are your thoughts on teaching kids at least rudimentary basics of meditation at an early age?
I think it's an incredible opportunity if we could seize upon it. And unfortunately, as you just said, the association between meditation and some sort of religious structure really holds back the process. And so these days I've actually just been using the word awareness a lot more often. But I define awareness as being something quite different from how most people think of awareness. Most people think of awareness as like alcohol awareness, campaign. It's essentially knowledge, right?
Right.
But what I'm talking about is something that's actually much deeper underneath. If we were to look at the brain structures, underneath the structures that hold knowledge, much more in tune with the organism itself, it's just a complete awareness of what is occurring in this now-ness. Whatever this moment is has nothing to do with your thoughts, beliefs, ideologies, or anything like that. When the nervous system settles into that awareness, there's just clarity. And that really is awareness. No, it's not knowledge. It is awareness. At that moment, there isn't a feeling of, I am Richard, or I am a this, or I'm a that, I'm a doctor, or whatever. It's none of that. It's just clarity. And, well, if there were anything that would help people now, it's that clarity. And that includes children.
And I think we're at a crossroads here of something. I don't know exactly what it is. It seems that we had the coronavirus, which was just unreal to all of us and unprecedented in any of our lifetimes. And if you had told me back in January, February that I'd be home for 3 months and trying to adapt and being laid off and being afraid to go out of the house, and it's just very interesting times. And then just as the economy opens up to that, now we have mass protests, and although some of it has gone beyond that into, rioting and things like that, it seems that we're in very uncertain times, to say the least. And meditation can help us focus, right, more during uncertain times. It seems like, if anything, this warrior's meditation is more important now than perhaps at any other time in most of our lifetimes. Yes,
absolutely. So what's happening is everybody's arguing and fighting and feeling the stress, and basically they're stuck in a beta brain wave. There's different brain waves that you experience throughout the day. When the body's balanced, beta is not the brain wave that you're normally in. For example, hunter-gatherers spend their day being peripherally aware, noticing the environment around them, because if they don't, they get et.
Yeah.
But surprisingly, that doesn't create an anxiety in them. That awareness creates a calmness, because it's alpha brain wave. It's actually a slower brain wave. It actually allows the body to stay in a rest and recovery mode and not a fight-flight mode, which right now everybody's constantly in a state of anxiety-producing fight-flight mode. It's as if we're being preyed upon all the time, right?
And that's not good for us. It's not good for our physical bodies. It's not good for mentally, certainly.
That's right. It stresses all the organs. It stresses just every aspect, throws off the hormones. It's a disaster to live in beta, right? But that's what people are right now, and no solution can come from that because there cannot be clarity, right? And so the first step is just to get back to clarity, and then from there you can start to communicate just as beings, not beings of this race or this ideology or that ideology, or this party or that party, but just as beings.
It seems to me that people have complicated life more than we need to. Do you agree that, we have our challenges. Obviously, we need to survive. We need to make money. We need to support our families. We need to have balance. We need to have all this stuff. But I feel like we complicate things way too much as well. And one of the most powerful, you have a lot of powerful passages in this book, but in chapter 11, if you don't mind, I'm going to quote here. You say, once you realize that at least to a great degree what you perceive may be occurring only within your brain, you can then begin to look at what your brain is perceiving and projecting with great curiosity, with fresh eyes, as it were, not assuming that what you perceive of the world or of yourself is ultimately true. And I think that's brilliant because that's the key to everything, isn't it? Everything that happens to us is in our own mind. I mean, everything. I mean, it's our perception from the pandemic to the riots, to the protests, to our health, to our jobs, to our family relationships. It's everything occurs inside the brain. If our brain were to shut off, all of this stuff would cease to exist in kind of an existential description, I guess. I mean, the world would go on for those still in it. But if your brain shut off right now, that's it for you. Everything's unplugged.
And you wouldn't even know the world was going on without you in it.
Right. So everything is, I used to think it was kind of woo-woo, kind of goofy stuff when I'd read authors who I now have great admiration for saying things like, the sun rises for you, the sun sets for you, the birds sing for you, there's joy in the world for you, there's music for you. And I thought, well, that's kind of selfish, that's kind of strange. But it really is true because I'm the only one that can experience that. I can only...
The reflection of the nervous system's perception of being in a box.
It's fascinating, and it blows my mind. It really does. And I wish I went to Berkeley, for goodness sakes, and I didn't get into this stuff. I mean, if you can't get into this stuff at Berkeley, where are you going to get into it, right? I mean, I wish I'd gotten into this certainly in my college years, but it's just an endless fascination and learning process for me that I don't think we'll ever fully understand how the mind works, but I think we overcomplicate things. I think life is a lot more intuitive and melodic than we give it credit for, and we just have to kind of get back in tune with maybe what our ancient ancestors knew a little more innately, you think?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that it's not something that we have done wrong per se. It's actually an inherited lifestyle that creates this phenomenon. So essentially, if you were to just look at the human being as an expression of the earth, just like any other animal, when we're the less insulated, there's a certain amount of insulation that every creature needs from the elements. But when you get beyond what is necessary, you're actually insulating the psychology from the corrective mechanism, which is nature. And when you insulate the psychology from the corrective mechanism, you start to go insane. Anxiety is going to pick up. You're going to be in beta brainwave all the time. So it's just a natural phenomenon of being separated psychologically from the earth, right? The hand to mouth, kind of get your fingers in the soil to move through nature as not as if you were moving through an external environment, but as if you're moving through your home, right? Not like an alien, but as an actual earthling. And human beings on a subconscious level, maybe even on a conscious level, we don't feel like we're of the earth. We treat the earth as if we're alien to it.
That's so true. It really is true. I mean, we act like we're not a part of, like we think of the animal kingdom and then ourselves detach from it, and that could be one of our greatest errors. I know people who are very happy in big cities, living in skyscrapers 50 stories up, and their tiny little cubicles of homes. And I wonder if they've conditioned themselves to accept that. I can't get myself to believe that innately is what we need. We don't need 50-story skyscrapers, and we don't need hustle and bustle of dodging taxis just to get across the street to the cafe. And it seems like all these stresses are things we might get used to. But when I'm living in my 5 acres of forest, I know you're in Southern Oregon and you're in forest as well. I've only lived here 2 years. I wish I'd done it 40 years ago because I have never felt more myself or at peace or in tune than living in this forest. I'm looking out right now from my studio at trees and greenery and hummingbirds coming up to the feeder, and there's deer walking around, and I think, my goodness, this is what we should be. This should be kind of our state of mind all the time, I think. That's
right, and you wouldn't have known that until you experienced it, and that's just the reality. We don't know what we don't know. We don't know what we're missing until we experience it. So when I was, a young man, and I grew up in the countryside, I grew up on a horse ranch, so I kind of, like at a young age, I had a strong connection to nature. But when I would meet people that were not connected to nature, we couldn't relate, right? And I couldn't understand how could you not appreciate this amazing thing that is life? But then after living in Tokyo for a long enough period of time, and that's what it is, the skyscrapers and all that, they just don't know. They don't know. And when they spend enough time in nature, something instinctive starts to emerge. And when that emerges and they feel that, it's not so easy just to go back to the way you lived before.
Yeah, there's not one study that I can find that living in tall skyscrapers and dodging taxis on your way to work is good for the soul or the mind or the body. But there's countless evidence showing green belts, and now they're saying blue belts, and studies all the time showing that just 15 minutes in nature every day, half an hour in nature, makes a world of difference. Nobody ever says to go on a walk, through your boardroom, in the big castles in the sky. They say go out, with green under your feet and walk barefoot on the earth. And there's just so much to that. And Richard, I wish we had more time. We will have more time, I promise, on Hughes from the Heart. If people are wondering, I purposefully kind of left it vague because this is a book to be read. It's a book to be reread. It's a book to really be just to immerse yourself in. And I know the Kindle version's available on Amazon. They can go to richardlhaight.com. That's Haight, richardlhaight.com, and get the books there as well. And people can contact you, correct?
Yes. And the books can be ordered in paperback or audiobook and any online store, and they probably be ordered through any bookstore. So.
Okay, I appreciate it, Richard. Thanks for being with us here on the show.
Thank you. Take care.
You're listening to Daybreak.
Thank you so much for listening to today's Daybreak with Jeff Slakey podcast. Again, I'm so happy and honored you found us and chose to listen. Please subscribe, rate, review, and share this with your circle of influence. It's a collection of some of the interviews, news, and conversation during Daybreak with Jeff Slakey on iFiber One News Radio KMAS, weekdays from 6 to 9. Thank you so much again, and talk with you next time.